The autumn leaves crunched beneath Sarah's worn sneakers as she clutched her 3-year-old son, Tommy, closer to her chest. The thin blanket wrapped around him was all that stood between his small body and the biting October wind. Her stomach cramped with a hollow ache that had become her constant companion over the past 4 days. 4 days since their last real meal, 4 days since they'd been evicted from their tiny apartment. "Mama, I'm hungry," Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible against her shoulder. His once bright eyes had grown dim, and his usual cheerful chatter had faded to weak murmurs. Sarah's heart shattered a little more with each plea, each time she had to say, "Soon, baby. Mama will find us something soon." But soon felt like a cruel joke. Her job at the diner had disappeared when the restaurant closed suddenly, leaving her with no income and no references. The few dollars she'd managed to save were gone, spent on the last jar of baby food that Tommy had finished yesterday morning. She'd given him the last spoonfuls while pretending she wasn't hungry, watching his little face light up with each bite. David, a construction worker heading home from his shift, first noticed them sitting on the park bench as the sun began to set. Something about the way the woman held the child, protective, desperate, yet trying to maintain dignity, made him slow his steps. He'd walked this route home every day for 3 years, but tonight something felt different. The woman's clothes were clean but thin, inadequate for the dropping temperature. The child in her arms was too quiet, too still for someone so young. David's own childhood memories surfaced, times when his single mother had skipped meals so he could eat, nights when they'd huddled together for warmth because the heat had been turned off. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle them. "Excuse me," he said gently, his voice soft but carrying genuine concern. "Are you and your little one okay?" Sarah looked up, her eyes immediately wary. She'd learned to be cautious. Too many people saw homeless families as problems to be avoided or threats to be feared. But something in this man's eyes was different. There was no judgment, no disgust, only kindness and what looked like recognition. We're fine," she lied, the words catching in her throat. Tommy stirred in her arms, and she could feel how much weight he'd lost in just these few days. His little ribs were more prominent beneath his thin shirt. David crouched down to their eye level, making himself less intimidating. He could see the truth in her hollow cheeks, in the way she unconsciously rocked the child as if trying to soothe his hunger. "I'm David," he said simply. "I live just a few blocks from here. When was the last time you both had something to eat?" The question broke through Sarah's carefully constructed walls. Tears she'd been holding back for days began to spill over. 4 days, she whispered. I lost my job. We lost our apartment. I don't know what to do anymore." David's heart clenched. He thought of his own daughter, safe and warm at home with his wife, probably complaining about having to finish her vegetables at dinner. "What's your son's name?" he asked. "Tommy," Sarah replied, looking down at the boy who was now staring at David with curious, tired eyes. "Hey there, Tommy," David said with a warm smile. "You know what? I was just thinking about getting some dinner. Would you and your mama like to join me?" Sarah shook her head quickly. "We couldn't. I mean, we don't have any money to." "I'm not asking for money," David interrupted gently. "I'm asking if you'd like to share a meal with me. As my guests." For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak. Kindness felt, fore and after days of people looking through them as if they were invisible. "Why?" she managed to ask. David was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Because a few years ago, my family went through a rough patch. We were lucky. We had people who helped us. But I remember what it felt like to watch my child go to bed hungry, to feel like I'd failed as a parent. No one should have to carry that alone." Something in his voice, the honesty, the shared pain, made Sarah believe him. She looked down at Tommy, who was looking up at her with such trust, such faith that somehow Mama would make everything okay. For him, she had to try. "Okay," she whispered. David led them to a small family restaurant 3 blocks away. The warmth hit them immediately as they walked through the door, and Sarah had to bite her lip to keep from crying at the simple luxury of heated air. The hostess looked uncertain when she saw their appearance, but David's confident greeting and request for a table smoothed the way. They sat in a corner booth, and David ordered without hesitation: soup, sandwiches, milk for Tommy, hot coffee for Sarah. When the food arrived, Sarah had to restrain herself from eating too quickly. She focused instead on cutting Tommy's grilled cheese into small pieces, watching his face light up as he took his first bite in days. "Slow, baby," she whispered, though her own restraint was wavering as the aroma of hot soup filled her senses. David watched them eat, his own food largely untouched. He was thinking about logistics, where they would sleep tonight, what resources might be available, how he could help beyond this meal. But first, they needed to regain some strength. As Tommy giggled at the taste of his chocolate milk, the first treat he'd had in weeks, Sarah looked across the table at this stranger who had become their lifeline. "Why are you helping us?" she asked again, needing to understand. David set down his coffee cup. "My grandmother used to say that we're all just walking each other home in this life. Sometimes the path gets rocky, sometimes we stumble, but we're not meant to walk it alone." He paused, watching Tommy color on the children's menu with crayons the waitress had brought. "Today, I get to walk alongside you and Tommy for a while. Tomorrow, maybe someone walks alongside me when I need it." After dinner, David didn't just say goodbye and walk away. He made some phone calls, to a friend who managed transitional housing, to his church that ran a food pantry, to a contact at a local employment agency. By the end of the evening, Sarah had a place to stay for the next 2 weeks and 3 job interviews lined up. But perhaps most importantly, she had something she'd lost: hope. As she tucked Tommy into a real bed that night in the transition shelter, his belly full for the first time in days, she thought about David's words. Walking each other home. 2 months later, Sarah started her new job as an administrative assistant at a local nonprofit. The pay wasn't much, but it was steady, and it came with benefits. She and Tommy had moved into a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was theirs. On her first day of work, she found David's business card in her purse. He'd slipped it to her that night at the restaurant with a simple note, "For when you're ready to help walk someone else home." That weekend, she and Tommy volunteered at the local soup kitchen. As Sarah ladled soup into bowls for people who looked exactly like she had just weeks before, tired, desperate, trying to maintain dignity in impossible circumstances, she understood what David had meant. The circle of kindness wasn't about grand gestures or having wealth to spare. It was about recognizing the humanity in each other, about understanding that any of us could find ourselves in need of someone to walk alongside us. Tommy, now healthy and energetic again, helped by handing out crackers to the other children. His bright smile and generous hugs reminded everyone there that hope could be restored, that kindness could indeed change everything. Later that evening, as Sarah read Tommy his bedtime story in their small but warm apartment, she thought about how one moment of compassion had changed their entire trajectory. David had seen them not as problems to be solved, but as people deserving of dignity and care. That simple recognition had been the first step back to a life worth living. In a world that often feels cold and disconnected, acts of genuine kindness become beacons of light. They remind us that we are all interconnected, all vulnerable, all worthy of compassion. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply see someone else's humanity and respond to it with our own. The jar that David had noticed that first night, the one Tommy had clung to as his last connection to security, now sat on their kitchen windowsill, filled with coins. Their emergency fund, but also a reminder of how far they'd come and how the smallest gestures of kindness can create ripples that extend far beyond a single moment, a single meal, a single act of seeing and caring about another human being.